I'm Rayceen Pendarvis, so they asked each one of us to introduce ourselves. I am a columnist, a social media personality, a community advocate, a former ANC commissioner, and a lifelong Washingtonian. I'm also the host of the Ask Rayceen show, which is the first Wednesdays, March through November, at HRC, and it's free. I also host a series of Rayceen Fix Me Up, a monthly real affirmation screenings. I also am a regular host in conjunction with the DC Office on Aging and the DC Center of LGBT Community, along with the DC Public Libraries and the DC Office on Aging. In addition, I'm a columnist to Swerve Magazine. I'm also a contributor to Ethnics Magazine's Unleashed Voice in Cuban India. I'm also one of the co-hosts of The Swerve Show, and you can see that at listenvision.live every Wednesday at 10 p.m. I'm known as the Queen of the Shameless Plug, the High Priestess of Love, and the Goddess of DC. I've won numerous awards throughout my 40 years of community service. Some of them I'd like to mention are the Capital Pride Hero in 2016, a finalist in the Excellence in Humanitarians category or the Mayor's Office on Arts, 2017. I received 3 nominations for Best Local Influencer, Best Clergy, Best Trans Advocate in Washington's Blade, Best of Gay DC Awards 2018. Earlier this year, I received several other awards, but tonight, unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend the Best of Gay DC, and I just got an email that I won Best Clergy. So that's a wonderful experience. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to our panelists and allow each one of them to introduce themselves, and then we'll begin tonight's wonderful discussion.
Hi, my name is Mindy Daniels. I didn't know I was going to have to introduce myself. So my bio is in the paperwork you got, but quickly, for the last 30 years, I've worked as an attorney in the District of Columbia Court of Appeals. I'm a court-appointed lawyer, and I represent indigent defendants. So I'm on that side of things. In the early 90s, I was the president of the Gay and Lesbian Activist Alliance, and an officer in many different ways before and after that. But in that vein, I wound up becoming a liaison, a lot because of what I do for a living. I became a liaison to the police and the prosecution on bias-related crimes. I helped write the Bias-Related Crimes Act and implement it, which was very difficult at the time. We had a law, but it wasn't being implemented. I worked a lot with gays and lesbians opposing violence. I was the originator of Walk Without Fear that lasted for a while. That was a yearly event where we would gather in DuPont Circle and we would remember the victims of bias-related crimes in our city. And then we would go on a march and stop at least most of the places where those crimes took place and have candlelight vigil. It became a big, and more importantly even, it became a big event for politicians to come to get a lot of exposure. A lot of people would come to this event. And it helped move along implementation of the Bias-Related Crimes Act. Finally, I was the victim myself of a bias-related crime. I was in a situation where on Lamont Street in Northwest, I was dropping off my date, I was in my car, and someone, I was double parked, and someone drove up and I guess saw me kissing a girl, and they put a gun in my face and pretended they were gonna just shoot me right then and there. But I can tell that story more when we get to the bias-related crimes, because then I became part of the system of trying to get that person arrested, and that's a story in and of itself.
Thanks, Mindy. Well, good evening, everybody. And I feel awfully lazy sitting next to Rayceen and Mindy and Dee, because my story is quite simple. As the costume probably tells you, I'm with the Metropolitan Police Department here in Washington, D.C. And even after 34 years in law enforcement, my mother calls it my costume, and she's convinced I will grow out of this at any moment. I am a native D.C. resident also, and I am an LGBT community member. Have been an openly gay member of the police department since I arrived on the department in the early 90s. And I am proud to be the commanding officer of what we call our Special Liaison Branch. The Special Liaison Branch is a group of units within the police department that serve our underserved and marginalized communities throughout the Washington metropolitan area. We're in the Asian community, the deaf and hard of hearing community, the Latino community, and the LGBT community. We are also working, although we do not have core liaison units, our unit, the Special Liaison Branch, is also working in the Islamic, Jewish, African, homeless, and those living with mental illness in those communities as well. The theory being that your average police officers on the street don't have time, or for various reasons of communication, culture, or just a history, do not have time to build relationships with members of those communities. And so the Special Liaison Branch is dedicated to making that time. We do outreach in the community, we do training and education, and then the most important part, I think, for the credibility of the officers that I work with, is we are also involved in everyday law enforcement, policing, investigating crimes committed by and against the communities that we serve. I want to take just 30 seconds to introduce you to two very important people that are with me. The first is Officer Caden Polk. Caden is an officer in our 5th district, and he's what we refer to as an affiliate officer, meaning his full-time job is he's a patrol officer in the 5th district in Northeast Washington, and he comes to us temporarily for 4 weeks as part of a learning curve, but also to help us as extra eyes, ears, and legs to help the Special Liaison Branch get to those places that we need to get. And then he'll go back to the 5th district and take those skills back to his fellow officers there. And then, really, for me, the star of the show tonight, because I think this is her inaugural event, joining us in the Special Liaison Branch, is Sergeant Nicole Brown. She goes by Nikki. This is Nikki's second day with the Special Liaison Branch. And for those of you that knew Sergeant Jessica Hawkins, I am happy to announce that she was promoted to lieutenant, which is excellent news. But with that promotion came a transfer. So she was moved to our 6th district, where she is now a supervisor in the 6th district. And Nikki has taken over her position, and she is going to fill those big shoes of now Lieutenant Jessica Hawkins. So please join me in welcoming Nikki. I will now turn it over to our first lady.
Hi. First of all, I want to give you, I'm floored that you all showed up. It's cold weather, so give yourself a round of applause. I am a 63-year-old proudly transgender woman who has lived in this city all of my adult life. I have seen this city go through its transition. I've seen the police department be friends and foes and adversaries. And I've always had the mindset, in order for us to survive in the city, we have to have a better relationship with the police department. Because who are you going to call when you have problems? Spider-Man, Superman, Wonder Woman? I have, originally, I got involved in advocacy during the years of the AIDS pandemic. And I was definitely disappointed that the country had a reaction that it did to AIDS. And I got involved because I thought it was a travesty that we knew so little about this disease and treated so people so bad. I became a member of the Ryan White Planning Council, which was put in place because of the attitudes of this country. And I remember ACTA, a group that was very vehement about the Reagan administration not having anything to say about the AIDS pandemic and labeling it as the gay disease. I also had, at that time, was very, very concerned about how little people were concerned about transgender individuals in the city. And a friend of mine by the name of Chrissy was killed by an individual who worked for the State Department, and he literally stabbed her 37 times and got off scot-free because he used the panic defense. So I formed Transgenders Against Discrimination and Defamation. We made some things happen, we made some things change. We had a better relationship with the police department, and we tried to change the narrative that every time something happened with the LGBTQ individual, that they said it was because the person didn't know, and I know and you know that's a damn lie. The majority of the incidents that happen with individuals who live our lifestyles, those people know who we are. And that is because they know who we are, a lot of times we are victimized by them. And I think to this day, we need to make that statement. We sometimes adopt that philosophy that a transgender woman is victimized, or assaulted, or killed because the person didn't know. We need to stop feeding that narrative. That's a bunch of bullshit. And I'm one of those persons, and I want you to understand this. I'm the vinegar in the potato salad. I'm going to tell it like it is. The other thing, what I'm doing today is I work at Casa Ruby. I have a consultant relationship with Casa Ruby, and my concern is the advancement of our youth and young people in particular who are LGBTQ, who are coming out. We need to help them find themselves, find their voice so they can take up the mantle. Those flyers that you have in your seat that are you're next to, although some of them, you may use some of them to write people's numbers down, but they're not there for that reason. They're there because I have, for the last 3 years, had a Solutions to Wellness conference where we come together and talk about promoting wellness in our community. Because if we are not well with the mind, body, and spirit, how can we expect to do the things that we need to meet the challenges before us? The last thing I want to talk about, I have a good relationship with the DC Center. I have been advocating, I just was appointed to the newly formed Street Harassment Commission by the mayor. I'm looking forward to that because street harassment is something that is a disguise for bigotry and hatred toward individuals who are different. And I'm a part of that committee, and we're going to make some of these happen. The last thing is I want you all to understand that all lives matter. And as an advocate, I've always said, the work begins with us. And that's why I'm so proud to be on this body. I'm so proud to say that I do a conference every year where people can have a dialogue with the stakeholders in this city. And we also have an honorees dinner the next day after that. And to that, Donald Burch is one of our honorees that we're going to be honoring this year. So give him a round of applause for Donald. Rayceen is one of our past honorees. You know, she's every woman. And I have a good relationship with Mr. Brett Parson. I call it Brent because it sounds a little more sexy than Brett. But anyway, I just want to say that I'm proud to be here. My advocacy continues, but I'm more concerned about the future of this country and the future of this city because these are some difficult times. And if not now, when do we stand up and take back the mantle? Thank you.
Thank you all, thank you so much. So we're gonna jump right into it. We wanna make this conversation flow very smoothly, and we just wanna set up some guidelines. We know that sometimes we can agree to disagree. And if it's something that you feel that you have a burning desire and you disagree with some of the panelists, please save that for afterwards and discuss that with them on the way out. We would like to respect everyone. We've prepared a series of questions that in the back you were asked to fill out a card. If you have done that, we will take those questions and feed them back to the panelists in due time. If you need those, Donald has those. So if you have some questions, you can write on there. Donald, please raise your hand. Okay, so people will see you. Thank you, and say present and accounted for. Thank you. So we like to respect everyone, and we're going to make sure that is the key to respect everyone. Eric will be our timekeeper. We know that as panelists, we like to do dissertations. Eric will key me in. We're asking each panelist to keep it to 5 minutes. When your time is up, I will wave my fan. And then you know, just as kindly, I will be fanning myself that you know your time is up. Okay, your time is up. So, here are our first questions. I'm going to throw out a series to our panelists. I'm going to put out 3 questions. The first, what have been the major issues in relationships with the police? The second one, raids, harassments, policing, public sex, and entrapment. Post-1988, gay bashing has seemed to be increasing. Those are 3 different questions. Who would like to take one? All right, we have 1 mic, so we're just going to pass it on down.
I want to talk about entrapment, the ugly elephant in the room. First of all, we've gotten better in this city, but entrapment still lives. I live in neighborhoods where I see it all the time. And I don't understand, and I'm trying to wrap my head around that in 2018, we had police officers who were going out deliberately setting up individuals, and that is entrapment. It is blatant. And a lot of times, it's total disregard for a person's human rights and civil rights. And I'm not saying all police officers do that, but I want to get an understanding why is it still happening. Why are people being set up to commit a crime? That doesn't make any sense to me. I will not be asking that. Entrapment is ugly. There's nothing you can tell me to say it's right.
Sure. So this is a question we get a lot, particularly in our communities where individuals are essentially forced into or are in survival street sex work. And it is a legitimate question. So the difficult part of policing, especially in the type of policing that I do, is we are constantly walking a very narrow line between advocates and enforcers. On the one hand, I feel very strongly that it is my job, especially as an LGBT community member myself, to ensure that my police department and the officers with whom I work are treating members of the LGBT community, and every community for that matter, with respect and dignity and constitutionally. With that said, I also have a duty to respond to complaints from the community that are legitimate complaints. And so you could see, probably, where there may be some difficulty walking that line on this issue. So let's take an area of the city that has been plagued by commercial street sex work, where people are now moving in, building large condos, paying inordinate amounts of money to now live there. And they are showing up to community meetings, they are writing their ANC commissioners, they are emailing the chief of police, their city council members, and they are coming to police departments at police stations and saying, we demand that you clean this problem up. I paid a lot of money to live here. I don't want it in my neighborhood. As police officers, we can't ignore that request. We have to respond to that request. So the question is, how do we do that? Well, we start with the very easy thing, which is police presence, right? Just a police officer being present in that area, hopefully deterring that type of crime from occurring. What we know happens is it's simply displaced. They simply move to another area and they continue to carry on with the activity that, whether you agree with it or not, is currently illegal, all right? That's an entirely different discussion that I would be happy to engage in a different panel discussion. But at some point, the citizens continue to complain and we have to start taking enforcement action. And in order to prove a case of solicitation, we have to have evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law that an individual intentionally engaged in a specific activity to exchange a sex act for some type of something of value, okay? That could be money, but it also could be for drugs, it could be for food, it could be for anything. There is no way to do that by observation. It's not like an officer can stand by and just sort of go and listen to the conversation that they're having with each other. It just doesn't work. So what we have to do is we have to engage in activity like what Dee is calling entrapment, that we call specific targeting operations in area where we have complaints. And it is specific. And I'm getting the fan, so I'm going to move on. Mindy, do you want to add anything, or she seems to want to rebut me? Absolutely.
I'm not talking about policing. I'm talking about deliberate, intentional entrapment. I do understand that prostitution and commercial sex work and a number of things are illegal. It's not what you do, it's how you do it. You don't go to somebody and tell them that you have $50 for them to have sex and they are living their lives struggling to survive, and you tell them, I'm going to give you $50 if you have sex with me. You're soliciting them more than they are soliciting you. That's entrapment. And you don't go to a person and tell somebody that you want to buy some drugs. You're creating the dynamics where there is a force of entrapment. In commercial sex work, we can argue about the difference, the pros and the cons, but we're talking about survival sex in many cases. And because we're talking about survivor sex, targeting individuals who are already down on their luck and enticing them to do something that you call illegal. I understand the law, and I've been there. I had a charge where a guy walked up to me, and I was talking to a friend of mine, and he said, "Don't I know you?" And he pulled me to the side like he knew me, and he was handsome, and I got kind of flirtatious and all that. Then he told me he had $40, and I said, "Well, I don't want to bother because I was doing something else." And the police swarmed on me, that was in 2011, and they charged me with solicitation. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about deliberate intent to lock somebody up for a crime they did not commit.
It's unacceptable, and if it happens, I hope that we investigate it and take care of that problem. That should not happen.
I just want to add to this, the discussion that I know that the Gay and Lesbian Activists Alliance is involved in legislation to decriminalize sex work, and at least according to a few of the questionnaires we got, there are current council members as well as candidates that are running who agree that, well, what is it? A lot of it's monetary fines now, I believe. That's not going to deter sex work. So there is that pending legislation out there, and you know, when it can look for it, write to your council members. That does mean something. It really does mean something. We're not in New York City. A little goes a long way here. So I would suggest that. The other thing is that the word entrapment, legally, at least according to the law, you're not entrapped if you're predisposed. So when I used to be active, what was happening a lot was there were really hot police officers going to these bathrooms in the park on GW Parkway.
Not me.
You don't get any fun.
No, I wasn't hot enough.
Well, let me tell you, the officers were pretty hot. And, you know, they would go into a bathroom, wait in the bathroom, you know, whatever it was, and a lot more back in the day, everyone was kind of on the down low. You know, you have State Department officials getting arrested in these bathrooms and God knows who. So I just want to say the legal definition of entrapment is predisposal, all right? So they don't find entrapment a lot. You know, it's like, oh, you were there, you were looking for it, you're not entrapped. So that's how the police get away with that. I think it was around 1990 or 91, I was defending people who got arrested at Peachtree Beach and anywhere else in DC for public sex. And the hard part about that was that I also did DUI work. And if you were a first-time DUI offender, you got off with just probation before judgment, do some community service, maybe take a driving whatever, and that was that. But if you got arrested for having sex at Peachtree Beach, you had a conviction. And that was, you know, there's a big difference, and that was very meaningful. I felt that was incredibly unfair. And I went to the city's attorneys and I said, you know, this isn't right, it's unfair, you need to change it. And they told me to go blow my nose. So when someone tells me to go blow my nose, I just blow harder. You know, I was an attorney, so I'm already in the system. I'm in the system down in the court. And I said, okay, well, this is unfair, and I think it would make a great Washington Post story to compare what happens when you get in a car and almost kill someone versus consensual sex at Peachtree Beach. I think it would be a great story. At first, they didn't believe that I would put that out there, but after they called around, they were like, you know, would she really do that? And they were like, oh yeah, she loves to try her stuff in the press. They actually came to me and they said, okay, we're gonna change it and we're gonna offer the same plea deal. I assume that's still in effect?
Well, we actually are not seeing as many cases coming through for public sex anymore. I'm happy to report that actually U.S. Park Police was probably the last department in this area that was doing operations at Peachtree Beach, because it was actually Department of Interior Property. And over a series of several years, they backed off doing those operations, and they've used other means to deter that activity, like fencing and lighting and things like that.
I think I just, no, I think
Cool. I'm gonna have to get up because I'm gonna have to keep us on track. So just for the sake of history, we want to take some times and state some facts. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move about, and as I give you a question, when your time is up, I will do this. I will do this, and I will do that. Because for time's sake, we've got to get back on time. So here are some states. We know this is Rainbow History Project, so we want to give you some information about dates, times, and some things that occurred throughout. Post-1992, Glove reports attacks increasing 1990 to 1991. Post-1992, 14 men arrested and raided on Cinema Follies on sodomy charges. Police had not used sodomy for years. Those were some of the, and we're gonna go down. Post-2013, Stephanie Thomas and Unica Davis murdered, 2002. 10 bullets each while they were sitting in a car at 5th and C Street. Earline Budd says someone picked them up, did not know that they were transgendered women. Post-2003, 3 shootings this week of transgendered women. Post-2011, July to November, 20 transgender people assaulted. Post-2013, Hassan N. of Glove says transgender women targeted. Post-November 2011, rally at prosecutor's office to respond to protest violence against transgender people. Post-2029, 2013. Post-June 29, 2013, after 4 attacks on transgender people and homicides, Earline Budd reported help organizations meet at the DC Center on U Street. Post-2016, 2 men robbing transgender women and killed. Post-1993, Latinx women murdered in Adams Morgan. Gays and lesbians believe she was killed because she was a lesbian. 200 people target the police and put together a vigil. Police failed to treat it as a hate crime. So here are some suggestion questions that now I'm going to pose to my panelists. First, when there are issues related to trusting police and reporting crimes to police and or working with them on investigation. Let me rephrase that again. Were there issues related to trusting police and reporting crimes to police and or working with them on investigations?
I really want to speak to this. The situation with the 2 transgender women that were assaulted and killed 10 times, shot 10 times. What happened with the communications with the police, and what often happens with the communication with the police, as I stated in my open statement, they feed the notion that the narrative is that they didn't know what they were. And a lot of times what makes it difficult for people to deal with the police department in this city is because that has become the narrative. And so a lot of times, even with us as LGBTQ, we quickly adapt that narrative. And 9 times out of 10, that is not the factual truth. And there's no proof that stands behind it. I lived in that neighborhood when those 2 young girls got killed. And the street drums came back and said they were killed because somebody who wanted to be in their set said they had HIV. I shared that with the police department, and they ignored it. And so this is my point. They'd rather use the narrative that they did not know that they were transgender, as opposed to searching and seeking the real truth.
All right. Next question. Were there any issues related to treatment in arrest or treatment in jail? I'll repeat that. Were there any issues related to treatment in arrest or treatment in jail?
Well, I think to me, the obvious answer is absolutely. If you're a transgender woman and you're taken into custody in most places in the United States, they are going to treat you as your biological sex, how you were born. They are probably going to address you using your birth name, and they are probably going to treat you throughout the entire process, including the court process, not the way you are presenting yourself or the way you want to be addressed. Washington, D.C. was no different for many, many years. I am happy to report in Washington, D.C. that in the mid-2000s, we were one of the first cities and first jurisdictions in the United States to create a model policy that demands that our officers, it requires that our officers, number one, immediately ask the individual what name and pronouns they prefer. And regardless of what their legal name may be, and I use that in air quotes, okay, based upon the government name, okay, they are to be addressed by their preferred name and gender pronouns. Secondly, we always now treat members of the transgender community and search them based upon their preference on who they wish to be searched by. So, if an individual who is a member of the transgender community gets arrested, the officer is required to ask, do you prefer that a male officer or a female officer conduct that search? And then finally, and this was a bit of a contention with the community as we negotiated this policy, we have made a decision that members of the transgender community will be housed, in other words, detained, on the same side as the gender with which they identify. However, they will be detained alone in a cell on their own. And the reason why we came to that decision was for personal protection. More for the transgender individual, but also because we as a police department also have a liability that we have to protect other prisoners, and we did not want to be in the position that we were placing individuals together in a cell and a potential allegation be brought forth. That is not what the community wanted. The community wanted us to place them in cells with the gender that they preferred, and our lawyers, quite frankly, just said it wasn't appropriate.
I just want to respond to that. You know, solitary confinement sucks, period. So, you know, what he's saying, I mean, DC is far ahead in, you know, a lot of the things that you said, but in making that ultimate determination, it's very difficult. I mean, can you imagine? Well, I mean, the way it works in DC too, that everyone should know, is that DC is basically a holding cell. If you're convicted of a crime, because it's not a state, everywhere else in the United States is different than the District of Columbia, and it's incredibly unfair. There used to be Lawton Reformatory in Virginia. That was basically the DC state jail. Well, since they closed that down and built houses and such, and it's gone, if you're convicted of a crime that's a year or less, you'll serve your time in the DC jail, but that's basically if you're convicted of a misdemeanor. If you're convicted of a felony, you're gonna be here as long as until your trial's over. I mean, I'm an appellate lawyer, okay? So I can get them when they're already convicted. And by the time I get my assignment package, which is maybe within 30 days of their sentencing, they've already been shipped out. I don't even get to meet my client. So they've been shipped out to Colorado, Indiana, all these private and state prisons. If you're really lucky, you get to go to Pennsylvania. So the bottom line is that what happens is it really tears families apart. They can't see their kids. The mothers, I get calls from these grandmothers all the time, you know, I'm sick, I can't go out to Kentucky to see my son, can you bring him back here so he can see me? The answer is always no. I have no control over that whatsoever. And it's very difficult for me to communicate with my clients They have email now, you can communicate, but in the end of it all, you know, the whole prison system in DC stinks, and it's different than anywhere in the United States.
And just very quickly, that's not a police matter. It's a corrections matter. It's a Bureau of Prisons matter. That's just not within our area of realm of authority.
I'll rank you. I'm the queen. So, here's another question, and I think, Mindy, you might be the best person on this panel of discussion. When it comes to experiences within the lesbian community and dealing with the police, has it gotten better? Has it gotten worse? Or what are some of the issues as a whole?
I believe, unless someone's going to correct me, I believe it's gotten better, but, you know, let's start from the beginning though. If you report a crime and you're going to report it as a bias-related crime, you're coming out, okay? So back in the day, a lot of people didn't want to come out. Now it's, you know, not as big of a deal to do that. So I think in that way, there's more communication with police, but that really just emanated from the world changing a little bit. At the same time, it's going to depend upon what police officer, especially as a woman, okay, and that whole male-female dynamic, and that whole male-lesbian dynamic, it's going to depend upon what officer you happen to get. That's just the bottom line. You get a nice guy like him, great. You get, you know, the son of a bitch, you're going to have a bad experience. I mean, that's, right? And there are plenty of them, right? Right. So, you know, I mean,
cross-examination here.
you know, lucky I don't do cross. But the bottom line is that there's good and bad in everything, and it's luck of the draw also with, you know, who you're going to report to. When I was a victim of what I thought was a bias-related crime, what happened was the guy drove away after he pointed the gun in my face, and me being me, I followed him. I actually followed him.
that.
No, they don't. I followed him. I was about 5 cars behind. Several blocks later, I got close enough to get his plate number. I immediately went to the district police station and I said, hey, this is what happened. Here's the guy's plate number. I want him arrested. And they laughed at me. First of all, because I followed him, they thought that was crazy, and they thought maybe I was a little crazy. So I was president of the Gay and Lesbian Activists at the time, so I had some power. Maybe even what you could call a lot of power in the gay community. It took every single contact I had to get that guy arrested. That's how hard it was. So I realized at the time that, you know, if I wasn't even me or I was just, you know, whoever, that probably just wouldn't have happened. That person just never would have been arrested. So that's where it starts. It starts with the police, and then after that, how are they going to write the report? Are they going to write it as a bias-related crime or not? You know, you're standing over them saying, I want you to say it's a bias-related crime, and they're like, yeah, whatever. But then that gets translated, you know, then the next step is the prosecution. You know, the assistant U.S. attorney, as they call it at the time, court counsel. And, you know, then you have to make sure that they're going to get it right, that they're going to do it right, or they're even going to prosecute it. It's not up to the police officer whether to prosecute. They merely take the report. So there are a lot of hurdles to get through in the system. I do think it's easier. I think the police department has grown. I think it's not quite as big a deal as, you know, coming out. But there are still going to be issues depending upon which cop you happen to get, and even which prosecutor you happen to get. So, you know, I mean, better not, may depend on the day.
Mindy, I just want to add one thing, and you know, whether you agree with me or not, I think, you know, in our society there's a hierarchy of respect and dignity, and over the history of police interactions, I think lesbians have probably enjoyed a little bit more respect and dignity than gay men and certainly members of the transgender community. And I still think that hierarchy exists. I still think that lesbian women have probably less contact with the police in general. and that we are in the LGBT liaison unit, the majority of our contact, the majority of our victims, and the majority of those who are accused of crimes in the LGBT community are gay men and members of the transgender community. And so the prevalence of abuse or disrespect to the lesbian community is less because we're dealing with them less. But I don't think that that is an indication that we have officers that aren't doing it, because they certainly are. They hypersexualize lesbian women, especially if they're lesbian women that they find attractive, or if they're lesbian women who they don't find attractive, then they are not taking them seriously because they look more masculine or act more masculine, and I think that's definitely occurring.
That definitely was interesting, your interpretation of what is happening. I don't think it is, I do believe there's a hierarchical situation going on. I think that transgender, in the whole scope of everything, have been marginalized and victimized more than anything else. And I think that has a lot to do with people's perceptions of what is acceptable in society. If you look at a gay male and he's dressed as a male and he acts as what you consider a masculine male, it feeds into that notion that we used to have when people who were feminine were disrespected and people who were masculine were respected. And I think that's what that has to do with that. Lipstick flaps because everybody got lipstick. You know, the old term dykes and full dykes, they don't even fly anymore.
All right, we got a lot going on, but I gotta keep y'all back on, so I gotta keep standing. Next time when we have this, I'm gonna put in my rider, maybe we have several mics opposed to one. So, here's one question, and I'm gonna take that, I'm gonna answer that. What has been the experience for LGBT African American people with the police? Well, someone who has lived almost 70 years, I've seen quite a bit. So I will speak to what it had through generations. Let me give you a history lesson. As a child of the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and up until now. At one point, being openly and a person of color, police harassed us. So it was not a good relationship. When you saw the police, here they came. It was they did everything to try to humiliate us. It was not a good experience that you were fearful of because of your sexuality, you were fearful of your color. So you didn't know there was a double-edged sword that hit you both ways. So you didn't know how to react. So as the 60s came about and we were going through the marches and the protests and the rallies in DC, I'm speaking to in DC, growing up and being a product in DC, was a lot of change. Still wasn't the best relationship. We had made some moves, we made some protests, we made a whole lot. So it was kind of combative. It still was like, but we weren't being beaten anymore. We were standing up for ourselves. It became very defensive. 70s was a little bit better than the 50s or the 60s. It still was a little better. It wasn't the best. It wasn't great. But then this is what we saw shift. We saw more people of color come onto the force. Then we saw more people who were openly appeared to be LGBT, whether or not they identify. I saw many of them in the clubs, so I saw them in many uniforms. So I knew that they were on our side, and now that we had someone on our team on the inside, it would be a better kind of relationship. You couldn't be open, you couldn't be as free as we are, there was no LGBT unit established. So then the 80s moved about, the shift of drugs, crime, addictions, a whole lot plagued the LGBT of color community. So it shifted, the dynamics were shifting. The elements were shifting. A whole lot was coming about. The 90s was going through a whole lot of phases. We were growing in leaps and bounds, and we were coming through a whole lot as people of color and people who were LGBTQ identified. Then now to see the forming of the LGBT police unit, something I had never seen in any other city other than where I lived at that particular time. It was very affirming, it was very wonderful, and it made me feel great that I had people that had the same sexual orientation and identified with me and had an understanding of how to come into our communities, how to talk to us, how to diffuse situations with the same gender loving. So we've come a long way, still a whole lot of issues as a whole, but we're growing. I'm not gonna speak to what's wrong, I'm gonna speak to what's right. We can always correct what's wrong and improve and make it better. I'm not attacking the police, I love the police, but we as an LGBT community have to get involved. Show up at the public hearings, go to the public safety meetings. You have to also know your police officers. I get out and know them. I know them, I talk to them, I wave to them, I see them, they know me. We stop, we have a communication. But we have to build better understandings and not live in fear of the police. You know, we do pay your salaries, and I know that. And as a taxpayer, I appreciate you and I celebrate you. And sometimes you get beat down. So we're gonna move on, we gotta move on. Here's the next question. Here's some facts, history lessons. Then we're gonna pose some questions. The Mount Pleasant riots, Latinx riots in Mount Pleasant in Adams Morgan in 1991 with the DC police. Most of the incidents were with our straight Latinx community, but team of LGBT people were helping to resolve the issues with the DC police. 2, in 1993, El Faro, a Latinx lesbian was killed in Adams Morgan outside the first gay bar called El Faro, and the DC police intervened to help the incident. 3, the murder of Bella Evangelista. In 2003, Bella was killed in one of the streets of DC, alleged with one of her clients discovered her identity as a Latinx or Latina woman. Here's the question. How has the relationships with the law enforcement evolved? Why? When did it occur? And has it gotten better with the Latinx community? Would you like to address that?
Sure, as I mentioned in the introduction, I wear more than one hat as far as the communities that I'm serving now, and the Latino Liaison Unit is actually working directly with the LGBT Liaison Unit. And our biggest fight currently is maintaining a relationship with members of the Latino community and convincing them that we do not represent the federal government or particularly the ICE agents that are going out and doing their jobs. There are many who refer to us as a sanctuary city, to include our mayor and many of our city council members. We in the police department simply state the facts. The fact is that the Metropolitan Police Department does not investigate or ask about immigration status, nor do we cooperate with federal authorities if they request that we turn someone over who is in our custody. The only time that we will turn someone over to federal authorities is if there is a valid warrant signed by a judge and we have a legal obligation to do so. We will also support our fellow law enforcement officers if they call for immediate assistance if they are under attack. In other words, they are in physical peril. Then we will respond to make the scene safe. But we will not remain for the operation, nor will we assist them in transporting or taking custody of anyone. It is very difficult for us to convince the Latino community that that is fact when ICE agents respond all over the city. They don't notify us that they're going, and they simply wear raid jackets that on the back say police, because they look like just any other police officer. They're jumping out of unmarked cars, and so we have Latino community members who believe that it's the Metropolitan Police. And so we fight that fight every day. With regard to specifically the Latino, the Latinx community, the LGBT community within the Latino community, we see the same problems as we do and the same concerns that we do throughout the community. They are marginalized in many ways with language access and also because of the fears of the immigration issues that are going on at a national level. So you didn't have to attack me, I finished on time.
Okay. Bam, get you some. You're learning. Here are some more history facts. Post-1991, police sensitivity training begins. Post-2009, Police Chief Lanier froze hiring of GLU, reduces numbers 7 to 4, train parole officers instead. The Gay and Lesbian Unit was formed in 2000. Parson on oral history, gold trouble growing, police still reluctant. Here are a set of questions. Now, and then after we do these, we're gonna take the questions I do believe that are on the cards. And this can be to all of you. What have the LGBTQ plus people have done to address problems concerning and creating change? I will repeat that. What has the LGBTQ plus people have done to address problems and concerns and create change?
When I see the role of the LGBTQ community plus, and what has been the role, is to have a dialogue with whatever police chief is in charge at that particular time and who has that post. But I also have seen that has been helpful is to have a mayor that bridges that dialogue. One of the things that I think we often do as a community, we feel somehow that we are attacking when we're talking about difference. You know, we always trying to justify how wonderful the police department is, and it kind of waters down when we need to speak up. And me, I'm never going to do that. We've come a long way, and the police department in this city is probably more progressive than any other city that I know about, and I've been to a lot of cities. But let's be truthful to what we know is to be the truth. Just like any other organization or any other body of work, there are still some people that need to be weaned out. And we need to also understand sensitivity training should be done in a manner that people who are most affected by those trainings be a part of. And what we have done traditionally is had sensitivity trainings just for the sake of saying we had a sensitivity training and it didn't match. So all I'm saying is let's stop and take a look at ourselves as a community. What made change come about, we were not apologetic by calling people out for what they were doing that was wrong. And we need to stop doing that, because when we become apologetic, then they think, well, we got it, we can do what we want.
You know, we do have watchdogs in the community. Even if something is not happening, people are always watching. The Gay and Lesbian Activist Alliance is one of them. There are other groups, which is why those groups can never go away. You can't say, oh, we have gay marriage now, we don't need to have gay groups anymore, we don't need to support our gay groups anymore, and that's just incorrect. I also want to say something about not only do police discriminate, or it's harder for transgender people, but our own community does. I remember early in the 1990s, I was in Trumpets. It was called Trumpets at the time. And I was fundraising for Walk Without Fear. And I happened to be fundraising with a transgender individual. And that person got harassed by our community, where I had to get in, little me, doesn't bother me, get in people's faces and say, what are you doing? What's your problem? Leave this person alone. I mean, it was really, really ugly. So really, for the first time, I saw for myself how people treat people. And what they were saying to him was, get away from me. I don't care about your, and I heard this a lot, I don't care about transgender issues. I don't care about someone getting hurt, getting killed, or whatever. I only want gay marriage. So I really think a lot depends upon where the community's head is at, what's important to them, and people activate by things that affect them. So, oh yeah, we're all for marriage, well, how are we going to deal with, issues with the police or this and that? Most of us don't experience that, and as a result, most people don't care. I just also want to say that everything's political, whether you like it or not, everything. And so, for instance, I would think that you're probably going to get a better response, more civil response, whatever, from police in Ward 2 than you're going to get in Ward 8. In that community, they're pretty powerless. Usually in Ward 8, not only are you kind of victimized by just living in a poorer community, but you are victimized by the police there in a way that you are never, ever going to be victimized by police in Ward 2. Those communities are policed differently, okay? And real quick, I just want to say, and this would apply to, crime or gay people, whatever, getting arrested, whichever end you're on. In Ward 2, you know, or on U Street on any Saturday night, it's bustling with parties. I mean, it's, occasionally I go out still, but, you know, it's clear to me that people are effed up, okay? You know, they're drunk, they're high, they're running into the bathroom, you know, to do whatever. And you never see a police officer stop these people. They're not even around. Whereas in the black community, in Ward 8, every single day, there are unmarked vehicles that go up and down the streets. They're called jump out units, drug and gun interdiction teams, that go up and down the street, roll down their window in unmarked cars, and say to every black man walking by, hey, got a gun, got drugs? Doesn't happen in Ward 2, does it? So it depends where you live, how you're going to get served in this city. And I don't care whether you have a black mayor or not, that's the way it is.
All right. That was a mouthful. So here's some of the questions. I'm going to take some of these, and if you have more, you can write them down. Time, where are we on time? We're good? We're ahead of time? Okay, very good. I'm going to pose this, and I'm going to come over to you. If you could change one thing about our relationship with the police, what would it be, and why?
I would change their reaction and their interpretation of crimes that impact us as transgender women. I would change the narrative as being a part of what they think is the problem when we are assaulted or killed. I would also encourage the police department to identify hate crimes when they are definitely hate crimes. You know, we talk about how difficult it is to prosecute hate crimes. We don't even try to prosecute. We just use the term. So I would change that thought process in the officers in our city. That when you come to a scene and a transgender person has been injured or killed, the first thing don't come in your mind that somebody thought she was a woman. The first thing that should come in your mind, this person has been violated.
Great, you know the rules. Historically, were there raids on bars or other gathering places in DC? Historically, I'm gonna pose this to Mindy.
Yeah, even at the high heel race. I mean, you go to the high heel race now, you don't have to worry about it. But there was a near riot, I remember, I think it was in 1991, something. Yeah. You know, I remember police coming into gay bars pretty routinely, checking IDs, what have you. I mean, it was just a difference in the way you were treated. And even just in general, you know, I mean, if you're straight and you're having sex in the car, you know, the cop will take his flashlight, knock on the window and say, move on, take it home. If you're gay, you're gonna get arrested. Maybe still to this day, I'm not sure. Maybe not. Maybe they wouldn't bother because, you know, whatever. But absolutely, the community was harassed by police, and, you know, police are very powerful.
And let me share a little history for you, Rayceen. In recent history, a member of this police department was intentionally staking out a gay strip club, photographing the vehicles, running their tags, and then demanding money from them because he was only picking the vehicles where the men had car seats in the back, so he knew they were married men. Okay? That was within 15 years. Okay? A lieutenant on our police department. So this is an ancient history. We used to call what is now our Narcotics Special Investigations Division, Morals Division. Okay? Just the name of that, all right? You can imagine what they were trying to do. They were trying to enforce morals, not laws.
All right, we have a few more coming in, hot off the press. Thank you. What event, if in it formulated the GLOW unit. Okay, would you like to address that?
It's a softball.
Okay.
So this is a great story, actually. Unlike some of our other liaison units that started because of lawsuits or riots, for instance, the Latino liaison unit, the Mount Pleasant riots, the LGBT liaison unit was really, I think, an amazing feel-good story of 2 police officers on our police department, 2 lesbian officers, who wanted to serve their community directly, and community members, and I'm going to pick him out right here, like the man sitting in the second row right there, Deacon McCubbin, okay, a legend in the LGBT community, supporting the idea that LGBT police officers can work in the community openly as LGBT community members. And it was really that partnership and that just incredible drive to support that idea that it started. Honestly, it was called the Gay and Lesbian Liaison Unit back then, but it was 2 lesbians, so it should have been like the Lesbian Liaison Unit. And we completely didn't pay any attention to the T back then. It was the Gay and Lesbian Liaison Unit. So we're really proud that we've evolved, that we are now the LGBT Liaison Unit. And eventually, I'm sure we'll add the Q and the plus in there. But that's the story behind it. It was driven by some statistics that were just amazing. In that year, 1998, that they proposed it, Maryland and Virginia reported between 150 and 200 hate crimes, respectively, and DC reported a total of 2. Now, I flunked graduate level statistics 3 times, and I can tell you, did you catch that? I do that joke all the time. But I can tell you that that's a statistically significant difference. That there's no way in hell that there were only 2 bias-related crimes in 1998 that we should have reported to the FBI. And those 2 lesbian officers were bright enough, and they also had great advice from people like Deacon to say, let's target that. Let's look at that number, and let's work on gaining the trust of community members so that we report. So that when we're now looking at 127 reported crimes as of now in 2018, part of it is very scary because 80% of them are LGBT community members reporting their victimization. But part of it is a sense of pride, how far we've come, that those community members trust us, know how to report, that our officers are listening, asking the right questions, and actually checking the box, and we are following up on those. So that's the story behind it.
Just a side note, if you really have enjoyed what's going on today, please remember that the Rainbow History Project relies on your kind donations. So please remember to give. And give, yes, through members like you, please give. You can PayPal, you can write a check, you can use your credit card, or you can break your penny bank open. Whatever you desire, please remember donations are a wonderful thing. Give from your heart. On the different levels, platinum, silver, and gold. This is a great question for Mindy. One of the problems I've observed in law enforcement speaks in facts, legal definitions with precision. But the LGBTQ community speaks about how something feels or is perceived. How have you successfully bridged that communication gap? One of the problems I've observed is that the law enforcement speaks in facts, legal definitions with precision. But the LGBT community speaks about how something feels or is perceived. How have you successfully bridged the communication gap?
I don't know that there's a bridge for that. Because when police are dealing with things and when prosecutors are dealing with things, they're thinking about the law, facts. Also, you have to realize that common sense is not necessarily the law. Okay, I mean, even a defense of self-defense, what you may think is self-defense is not necessarily self-defense. So there's common sense, what you think things should be, and then there's the law. So you do come up with issues where, for instance, let's say there's what you feel was a hate crime, okay? And you say, well, why do you think it was a hate crime? I just know it. You know, they followed me out of the bar, Called me some names, and yeah, but they didn't call you faggot or something. I mean, they didn't call you a very specific name, did they? Well, no, but I just know, so there you are, you're arguing with the cop, I want you to report it as a hate crime. I want you to prosecute it as a hate crime. But they're gonna go with their best chances of, they're already thinking conviction. A prosecutor isn't gonna go in and put you up on a stand and prosecute something as a hate crime, and you're gonna get up there and they're gonna say, well, why do you think it was a hate crime? Oh, I just know it was. It felt like one. They followed me from a bar and the way they looked at me and, and all this. So I don't know that you're gonna bridge that the emotional divide versus dealing with agencies like the police or the government. I think they've gotten better, but I think all over the United States today still, unless someone's beating you, and while they're beating you, they're saying, goddamn faggot, I hate faggots, it may not be reported as a hate crime. Also, let's remember that hate crime statutes are sentencing enhancements, okay? It's not a statute in and of itself like I was assaulted with a deadly weapon. You can still prosecute someone for an assault without being a hate crime. And oftentimes in our community, the prosecutor would say, well, look, I'm willing to prosecute it, but I don't think I can prove it was a hate crime, even though you think it was. Well, the emotional end of that is, no, I need that for me. I need that for me. I need, whether it win or lose, I need that for me. Well, prosecutors get promoted on wins. You gotta remember that too. See, everything's political. So they don't want to take the case that they're going to lose. They don't want to put forward something that they're going to lose. And hate crimes are sentencing enhancements. I think it's 1.5 times, 1.5 times whatever the penalty is.
Not mandatory.
And it's not mandatory. Yes, so then you have the judge. So there's a lot to get something done as a hate crime, and police, the government, judges don't like it unless something is really, really clear. And I think that one, the Alfaro, where that lesbian got murdered, I don't think that was ever, I don't know if they even caught the person, but I don't even think it was even reported as a hate crime, even though we all knew it was.
It actually happened right in front of you, and I don't know if you noticed. So Dee spoke passionately about the murder of Stephanie and Yukia at 50th and C Street Southwest, the neighborhood that she lived in at the time. And she said that people on the street were talking and knew for a fact that they were targeted because, and she said after that, but the police didn't listen to us. The feeling, passionately, in the community is that those two women were gunned down, the number of bullets they were struck with, the only explanation there could be in the eyes of the community is that's a bias-related crime. The unfortunate part for us, and I can't speak really too much about it because it's still an open case, is we have yet to be provided actual evidence of that. And so we can't label it legally as a bias-related crime until we have actual evidence. We can't bring feelings into it.
Thank you. Here's another question. There's a kind of entrapment that Dee mentioned that she and other transgender women experience, harmful relationships between the police and our transgender community, in such a way as to make it harder to stop the crisis against trans women. Does our city value property values more than trans lives? That was a mouthful.
I recently attended a forum that was speaking to redevelopment in a certain particular neighborhood. And one of the things that was impressive to me, this was the Attorney General that we have in the district, and she said to the people of that community, we cannot lock up everybody because of your disheartening feelings about your neighborhood. You have to establish some type of understanding that some things that we can do and that we have to come up with solutions. One of the things I think is really disappointing to me is that this influx of new people coming into our city and buying property, and everybody deserves to have a safe environment wherever they live at. But the most important and disheartening thing to me is that they don't understand that some of the people that are out there doing commercial sex work are literally starving. They're also broken people. And that because of our city's economics and the status of this country in terms of closing down certain social programs, ending things that would maybe help a person transition from homelessness and have a better life, are drying up. And so a lot of people find themselves in unfamiliar turf, maybe not wanting to be out there doing what they have to do, but it's survival. And I know that too, a lot of people who've never been there, that sound like excuses, but it's reality. And so a lot of times I'm bitter about some persons coming to my home, which is Washington, D.C., and having that insensitivity about it. Because there are people who do commercial sex work and don't know where they're gonna sleep or eat. There are people who have do commercial sex work who have families, and they have, and it sounds like an excuse. To most of us, it sounds like an excuse, unless you lived it. For years, I was a commercial sex worker. In the 70s, there was no solution to transgender employment. There was no solution to being able to survive when I left home. My family didn't abandon me, but I had no other choice but to live in my own truth on the streets. I didn't have any alternative. Nobody was hiring me. Gay men didn't befriend me. I was the extreme. So I had to do commercial sex work. Today, it's a different dynamic. There are a lot of resources, but that doesn't take away the fact that some people are falling through the cracks. And so what I would like to think that the police would do is work with the community and work with the transgender community, and let's work with all parties that are involved to come up with solutions to help those individuals who find themselves in those unfamiliar positions. And maybe one, I'm gonna say this, decriminalization may be the answer. Because then that would stop targeting transgender. There may be neighborhoods where transgenders or anybody with commercial sex work without the threat of reprisal from the neighborhoods and the police.
That's a mouthful again. What accountability measures exist for the so-called bad apples on the force? How does the department assess the success of its training initiatives? Would you like me to repeat that?
I got it.
Okay, great.
I got it. Great question. So police officers are no different than any other citizen. They are entitled to due process, which means when an allegation is made against a police officer for a violation of the law, they are entitled to the same protections as you as a citizen. Now, one of the discussions that's going on in our society right now is, are police officers given the benefit of the doubt? Do we believe police officers more than we believe the average citizen? According to the law, that's not supposed to happen. But I think Mindy will tell you, I think she will agree, that in practice, in reality, it in fact happens, okay? I don't know that that's a police problem. I think, again, that's a societal problem, but we certainly reap the benefit of that when it comes to being given the benefit of the doubt and when you're weighing credibility. With regard to specific complaints of criminal activity, the current process is that a third party, in this case, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia, will investigate that case by way of a grand jury investigation. They are assisted by our Internal Affairs Division. And one of the things that we've done here in Washington, D.C. that other police departments haven't done is we have actually partitioned off our Internal Affairs Division, that the members of Internal Affairs are not served by the same police union and are not part of the same rank structure as other police officers. And so I, as a ranking member of the police department, cannot order an Internal Affairs agent to do anything. They hold authority over me, and they have carte blanche authority throughout the police department. If it is a policy complaint, we have also a unique system within the District of Columbia to address that. We have the Office of Police Complaints, which is a completely separate agency from the Metropolitan Police Department with civilian oversight, a civilian review board, and investigators that handle that investigation into that administrative complaint. They then do a complete investigation, come to a conclusion and a recommendation for the chief of police, and then the chief of police, through an office called the Disciplinary Review Office, then evaluates that and metes out discipline. We also have a police union, and do I need to talk to you about what police unions are there to do? They're there to protect their members, and so that is kind of the push and pull of what this process is. You want to add anything, Mindy?
I just wanted to add that if you've ever served on a jury in the District of Columbia on a criminal case, during voir dire jury selection, you would always be asked the question, would you believe a police officer more just because they're a police officer? Some people say, yeah, my brother's a cop, you know, so yeah, I think I would be biased. Or some people say, yeah, I once got beat to shit by a cop, so no, I wouldn't believe anything they say. I do think things are changing, though. I see it in my work, that officers are not automatically believed, but like you say, the normal citizen is going to think, well, that person had a reason to lie, but why would a cop lie? And they don't think of all the reasons why a cop would lie. That's the bottom line. The other thing, too, is that it's what I call a code of silence. There's a code of silence among police officers. They're going to protect each other. There's probably a code of silence among firefighters. There's a code of silence among doctors. Okay, that doctor that left the sponge in your body, another doctor's not going to tell. You bring a medical malpractice action against a DC doctor, you have to have expert testimony that says that person did something wrong. You're only going to be able to get someone from California as an expert. No doctor is going to testify against another doctor. And so you're dealing with, things aren't so simple, and you're dealing with a lot of issues, and especially when you come to a fraternal order of doctors, police, firefighters, where there's a culture of a code of silence and self-protection.
You were on it. Before we close out, let me just pose this final question to each of you, and then I'm going to bring Deacon to talk about the incident with the police in DuPont Circle. You will address that right after I pose this last question to each one of that. Then we're going to turn it over to Eric for final statements to close out. But please remember, if you enjoyed what you see, please feel free to give a donation to the Rainbow History Project. All forms of donations, give kindly, give from your heart, give generously. We take checks, PayPal, Cash App, MasterCard, Visa, American Express. The final question to each of you. We spoke about the levels during the various decades that occurred with the relationships with the LGBT community and the police. The level of harassments regarding color, gender, and various activities in the club shakedowns and harassments. Do you feel, and this is your own personal belief to each one of you, that still exists? And if so, how do we begin to pick it apart, begin to take care of it and make it better for 2018 and forward?
My impression is that there's less of a culture of it, and it's more individual. Brett may know more about that than I do. But that's my sense of things, is that you go back 30 years and there was a culture of a lot of bad things. And now it's more individual experiences, individual circumstances. There's always going to be the guy that wants to make money, who's going to sit in the car with the camera, look for the guy with the car seat, leaving a gay bar. There's always going to be people who look for an angle. And police, even though you know, they're the ones who are supposed to stop crime. They're, you know, good and bad and everything. There are police that are criminals as well. So, but that's my personal impression, is that, at least in DC, I'm not moving out of DC at the moment, but in DC there's less of a culture of it. But I do want to say too that I think the major difference in DC, aside from it being a gay mecca, and we do owe a lot of that actually to former Mayor Barry, who supported the strongest human rights law in the country at the time, didn't have much support for that. So whatever else his issues were. But I do think the main difference has been the police unit and Brett and his attitude and him being responsive. You know, it's like anything else. You have a problem with a CVS employee or whatever, and you're really angry and you want to report it and you don't know where to go, you're going to be really steamy, you're going to get really hot, and you're going to try and report it everywhere, and you're going to yelp it, and God knows what you're going to do. Whereas if you know where to go, you know where you're going to be heard, everything's going to be better. And so with that unit coming in, I mean, people would, like when people called me before, I used to have to respond. I mean, maybe not necessarily on the scene, but I have to go down there and be the prosecutor, or God knows what else. When they showed up, it was great. Call Brett, here's his number. And it was taken care of. I didn't hear back from those people. I didn't hear complaints. So I do think that having units like this, I think in every city, would be helpful. And if they're meaningful, and it's not just a name. And I think that Brett did that. I think he made it meaningful. I'm not saying he's perfect, or things work out perfectly, but there was a place to go. And there's still a place to go, and there's safety in that.
Wow. It's not often you can be on as a police officer, you can be on a panel with a defense attorney and be lauded with that kind of compliment. So thank you very much. This is not a Brett Parson operation. This is a commitment from the very highest levels of Washington, D.C. to change the culture of our police department. And that started with Charles Ramsey, the chief who was the chief at the time the liaison unit started, and has continued, although it's ebbed and flowed a little bit with some chiefs, throughout our department's leadership. And our current chief, Pete Newsham, one of the first things he did was he moved the liaison units immediately under his command, under the chief's office, not under patrol, not under some administrative branch, but under the chief's office, because he wanted to make a statement. What I will say is, we absolutely still have these problems we're seeing. And I think anyone who denies that is denying reality. The difference today is that there are avenues and there are places that members of this community can go that they feel safe. But folks, as recently as this week in Prince George's County, we had a Prince George's County police officer for raping a woman while on duty on a traffic stop, okay? We're not talking decades ago, we're talking this week he was arrested, okay? As recently as less than 9 years ago, a Metropolitan Police Department was arrested and convicted and is still in prison for jumping on top of a car full of transgender women and firing indiscriminately into the car, trying to kill them while he was drunk and off duty after he unsuccessfully tried to pick them up because he considered them prostitutes, okay? That's not ancient history. That is recent, and we need to acknowledge that that has happened. We are hoping that those are individual bad apples, and that through your help, when you identify them, when you get us the testimony and the evidence that it occurs, that we can get rid of those people. We also hope that we're doing good training and we're hiring good people. And that's how we try and combat this.
First of all, I agree. We're light years from where we used to be. I remember when you had to have 3 parts male clothing on, or you were locked up. If you were transgender, they would arrest you if you didn't have 3-part male clothing on in this city. I also remember if you had a hair on, a wig, you know, they would snatch it up. Back in the day, we used to pin it up all over there. They would pin it, bullying you. And so it was real ugly once upon a time. The story was real ugly. And a lot of times, we don't give credit where credit is due. We have people that come to this city and talk about the police department as if it is the way it is in other cities. I am an advocate, but I have to be honest. we have one of the best relationships with the Metropolitan Police Department, and it is because of Parson. He remembered me when I was a criminal, he was locking me up, and he remembered me today, and I have to give credit where it's due. What I'm concerned about in these difficult times, where we had the foolish mindset of electing Donald Trump, that we have this wave of intolerance and bigotry that's rearing its head again. And so we don't need to forget from whence we came. And there are people who are now trying to put themselves in positions of power that feel it's okay to discriminate, feel it's okay to treat people by their dress code. Human rights has no dress code. All people deserve to be treated humanely. And so today, having this type of dialogue for me is good, because we continue the dialogue so that we won't go back. We are now at a time where the vetting process, we know that in this city, if we be honest, the crime rate has gone up. And it's gone up in neighborhoods of poverty. We know that we have what you call an epidemic again, but it's not crack, it's Scoobies, or what is it called? Y'all know what I'm talking about. Synthetic weed. So we have to look at the lessons learned. We can't rest on our laws and sit back here and talk about, oh, everything is wonderful. And I respect you so much because you're honest. There are some bad weeds in the barrel. We have to acknowledge that the vetting process of hiring police is something that we have to stay on and make them be very, very mindful that these people who come with their moral issues and want to be a police officer are not good for this city. So as long as we keep people hands in the fire and make them be conscious that we are a community that is watchful and mindful of our human rights and our civil rights, then nothing can happen to change that. See, we can't get so comfortable and say we're the most progressive city in the country, and we're the only jurisdiction that vehemently didn't vote for Donald Trump. But there's still bigots among us. There's still people who want to see transgenders harmed. There's still people who want to use the panic defense whenever there's an LGBTQ person injured, hurt, or maimed, or killed. They say first and foremost, that person disrespected me. We have to say loudly and clearly, that's a damn lie. It's never an excuse to end a person's life. It's never an excuse because of the way somebody dress and act that you have some justification that, oh, I'm so terrified because they was a transgender and that was a woman. That is the most ridiculous thing that we've ever allowed to be in as an excuse. And we need to stop this. It's almost the same thing that we did when we were in Jim Crow, when they were hanging black men because they were looking at white women. That's shameful. So we need to change that narrative anytime, and that's what I'm saying to the police department, and I'm saying to you. Whenever you come on a scene where a transgender woman has been injured, maimed, or killed, don't have that in your mind that it's because of their identity. It's because of who they are. And it's because it is a different culture of people who are predatory and want to hurt us. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all of our panelists for your wonderful insight. Before you leave, we're just going to bring two people up to close out. There are gift bags on the table. Please take them as you leave out. Please take them. We have snacks. We have refreshments. Please take the gift bags. Please, they're free. They're for you. Take them. Please take them. I put them together. They're for you. They're for everybody. Please take them because I put them out together. And you hurt my feelings when you don't take them. And take the flyers with you. So I'd like to personally, before I turn this over to Deacon McCumbin, before I turn this over to you and Eric, I'd like to, we have the ability in this city to come together to do things, to affirm us in all kinds of affirming spaces. Please utilize the Rainbow History Project. That's why donating is very important, because they are the only place in Washington, D.C. that tells our history, that compiles our history, has put our history together, and makes sure that our history will last way beyond us. It is important that we know our history. It is important that young people know from where they come from, and the struggle of the LGBT community, and the importance and the richness and the values, and to know who people like Sylvia and Marsha P. Johnson, Harvey Milk, Sylvester, all of those amazing people, Avis Pendarvis, Dorian Corey, Pepper LaBeija, all of those amazing people. The story, when I was sitting and I was telling someone about the woman, Lady Java, in Las Vegas. Many people had never heard of her. She's still alive today, she's in her 80s. She is the first transgender woman to perform in Las Vegas. And she won and sued the city of Las Vegas. She won a suit and sued them in the early 40s. In the early 40s, because she was a transgender woman and unbelievable. She opened up for people like Dean Martin, Red Fox, and because she was so devastatingly beautiful, they couldn't believe that she was a transgender woman. So the police would raid the show and stop it immediately. Now, going back to the 3 articles of clothing, she was smart enough to wear a men's bow tie, a men's watch, and a men's garter belt. So when they would stop her show in the middle of everything, run up on stage and try to embarrass her, she held up her arm, she pulled back her jewelry, and she lifted her dress. And the show could continue after she proved it. And they would literally sometimes take her off stage, take her behind stage, to prove that she was actually not a real woman. And they would do that. And this woman, like her, is still living. There's so many people living. There's so many people in Washington, D.C. who tell the story. And that's why the Rainbow History Project matters, important. Utilize places like HRC, the D.C. Center, Casa Ruby, Smile, all of these amazing, wonderful places, the Wanda Austin Youth Home, the importance of bridging communities and generations, and going to places. That's why I have the Ask Rayceen show, which is free first Wednesdays of every month at HRC. The next one is November 7th, and all of you are invited. Please follow, it is RAYCEEN. That's why I'm the queen of the shameless plug, because I plug everything. So no one owes me, but if you want to give a donation, please make it to the Rainbow History Project if you're watching in Facebook land. So without further ado, I'd like to turn this over to Deacon McCartney.
I didn't know that we were going to ask me to come up here and do anything, but I came here tonight primarily to celebrate how far we've come with Brett and the LGBT liaison group. I remember 47 years ago in the district when we didn't have an LGBT liaison, we didn't have open gay and lesbian and transgender police officers. We had a police chief, Chief Wilson, who refused to meet with members of the gay community. And instead we had officers that were busy busting people in Georgetown and other places around town, entrapping people, and that was real entrapment. And so for about 2 years period, what was then the GAA, now the GLAA, had tried to get a meeting with the police chief. And he refused to meet with us, he just wouldn't do it. So finally we had about 12 people that went down to his office one afternoon and said, we're here to see the police chief. And they said, well, he's in Chicago right now. We said, that's okay, we'll wait. We sat down in the office and we waited. And at 5 o'clock, he hadn't come in yet. And they told us we had to leave the office or we'd be arrested for trespassing. And we said, that's okay, we're staying. And Bill Bricker, who was the president of the GLAA at the time, and Kate Ware was the vice president, and myself, the 3 of us had agreed that we would not leave. The other people would leave and provide support outside, but we wouldn't leave. And so they arrested us and took us to jail. 2 weeks later, we went to court, and we didn't really have a case. We were guilty, we were definitely guilty. So we pled no contendere, but he gave us a chance to explain to the judge why we had done what we had done. And after about 10 minutes of deliberation, the judge came back into the courtroom and he said, "You pled no contendere. I had no choice but to find you guilty. But if I had been in your position, I would have done the same thing. No time, no fine, you're free to go." 2 weeks later, Chief Wilson met with us. And that started a communication, a conversation between the community and the police chief that eventually culminated in the liaison community, and also in the police review board as well. So sometimes you just have to go sit in someplace and make yourself a nuisance and get things done. Thank you. Thank you, Brett.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add that, was Frank Campbell there?
He was one of the 12.
Yeah, I mean, he was a professional nuisance in the good way. I just want to tell a quick story. He was my mentor, and I remember I had become president of the GLA, however that happened. It was kind of an accident. And I went to my first meeting, and I don't know, I was given the task of getting something from the mayor, some information, I don't know what it was. And 2 weeks later, I go back to the meeting, and I called him a lot of times, and I tried. He said, "Well, you know, what'd you get?" And I said, "Well, I mean, I called, I this, I that," and he just screamed at me and said, "What kind of a president are you?" Plus, I was only like the second female president, so that was another issue. He did not want that name changed from GAA to GLAA, so that was pretty fresh on him too. Anyway, the bottom line is that I said, "Well, what would you have me do?" And he said, "You get a couple of people and you call every minute, because if they're not doing your business, they're not going to do any business." I became a professional nuisance, and it worked. It worked every single time. You know, you can call it the squeaky wheel, but it's more than that. It's being literally a professional nuisance, not leaving, not going home until they conduct business with you. So thank you for doing it.
So just really quickly, you've heard it many times before, but please, if you enjoyed what you saw, please donate. Our Facebook page is probably the easiest way to do it. There's a button on our Facebook page. Other things, there's a survey coming out tomorrow. If you registered through Eventbrite, it'll be in your inbox by about noon. Please fill it out so that we can use it for more fundraising and to improve these panels. So, thanks for coming out, and we hope to see you at the next one.